Hi, and welcome to this live reading from True Bastard, a Dark Sparrow novel by India Kells, and this is presented by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Prologue. Liam tried to ignore the annoying pain in his knee and wondered when his brain would start to treat it as a secondary buzz. The good news was the constant improvement, and, according to the doctor, with steady physical therapy there was a chance that he could fully recover. Maybe. At least his captain had allowed him to return for special cases, or more specifically, the Finch case. He was lucky that Liam, being the son of a man on the most wanted list, hadn't reached his superior's ears. However, field work was still out, but he could live with that for now, especially since his father had transformed into a dangerous ghost, and the situation was bound to get worse. Chewie pulled on his leash through the snow as they approached the diner. It was their spot, as he couldn't cook. His coffee resembled tar at best, so that little restaurant was his saving grace. His and Chewie's. When he pushed the door open, he was glad to see old Debbie behind the counter. It was against regulations to allow his scraggy mutt inside, but Chewie had charmed the owner better than he would ever be able to. "It's my favorite customer," and his tolerable owner. "Hello, Debbie." "Hello, despicable cop." A bunch of customers laughed, but Liam only shook his head. One of his colleagues had given her a speeding ticket the week before, and he was now the devil's spawn. If only she knew. "Can this despicable cop have a cup of your amazing coffee, Debbie?" As usual, she sniffed and picked a scone from the tray for Chewie before pouring Liam a cup. "If it wasn't for that dog and your gorgeous eyes, I would have kicked you to the curb in an instant like I did my ex-husband." Liam paid and winked at her before heading to his favorite booth. Chewie snuck under the table as Liam gave the mutt his treat. The restaurant was festooned with garlands of red and gold, and there wasn't a single space that didn't remind him that Christmas was just around the corner. Preferring to ignore it, he opened his backpack and spread his files on the table. It was challenging to focus, especially considering the last few days. All the brothers were in an uproar. Lazarus had survived the surgery following this firefight, but was still in a coma. Archer had arranged for him to be taken care of in a secure location with help from Kai and Sam, a secret place inside the hospital where Finch wouldn't be able to find him. Sasha had helped tremendously in the medical aspect. She'd canceled all her upcoming contracts as a doctor on the mission field to stay with Lazarus until he recovered. Liam didn't know if there was something between them, but one look at Sasha's face when she saw his brother in the hospital bed confirmed that she cared for him as much as all the brothers did. And now that Izzy had destroyed Jameson Finch in front of the world, they would have to make sure he never rose again. One of the conversations he'd had with Archer and Alexei in the waiting room stuck with him. What did Finch have left? Money? And a certain amount of hardcore connections? Connections could be cut, but money was another thing, slippery to get a hold of like an eel. Find the money. An obvious task, but far from an easy one. "Hello, Liam." He smiled at that voice that had become so familiar in the last few years. "Hello, Gabrielle." The blonde spy slid in the booth in front of him. There was something different about her. For the first time ever, she appeared tired, and sadness clouded her blue eyes. "What's going on, Gab? Any news on Lazarus?" "Nothing new, if that's what you're asking." Liam sighed in relief. "Sorry, it's just you look like someone kidnapped your dog." When the most dangerous lady he'd ever seen got misty-eyed, something had to be very wrong. "You could say that. Bad news comes in pairs. My boss, who was also my best friend, has been murdered. I just heard the news." Immediately, his cop instincts perked up. "What happened? Is the killer on the loose? Is it related to Finch?" She dismissed his questions. "Our team has a strong lead, and I know they'll find him, but I need to get to them. I've always been her second in command, and the organization is shaken. Many of our operatives are currently undercover, and others are deep in dangerous missions. Get there and take care of everything." Liam could only nod, understanding her motivation. Until now, Gabrielle Thorne had been one hell of an ally in chasing down Finch. "Is there something I can do to help?" "No, unfortunately. The other thing is that I'm leaving all of you in a hot jam, and I don't know how long it will be before I can help you again." Liam shook his head, hands trailing over the papers before him. "Don't worry about it. We'll handle things as best we can. As I was organizing my family to leave Chicago for a while, I was thinking about what Finch would try to do and where he was hiding." Pushing the documents around, Gabrielle lifted an eyebrow. "Seems we had the same idea. At first glance, his bank accounts are fuller than full, and I'm not referring to his bonds, shares, and whatnots, not that he'll be able to use them anytime soon. When everything looks so clean, it raises my suspicions, makes me wonder where the dirt is. Don't you agree? When Finch's assets are frozen due to the investigation, I'd be curious about what isn't on the books, too. On that, they were on the same page. It's going everywhere. I need to get my mind around it. I've worked in the gang unit, so I'm used to complicated cases. Once all the facts sorted and straightened, it'll be easier to figure out what he's up to and what's happening. Numbers aren't my forte either, and as I suspected it would cause you a headache too, I reached out to a friend. After a talk, it seems that we're not the only ones digging into Jameson Finch's assets. And I have to be honest, apart from Archer and maybe even Isabel, we aren't the sharpest tools in the shed. And I can't ask your brother to do much more than he already is. He's done so much, and he has his own family to protect. Liam snorted. Not when it's this deeply detailed. That's when I reach out to a specialist within our department. And that's what I got you. Liam sighed and leaned back on his seat. He didn't need a specialist. This Irish boy needed a damn miracle. Distracted by the chiming of the front door, he looked up and saw an angel. It was a cliche, but he could hear bells ringing as the woman glided inside. Her tawny hair was tied in a loose chignon, with tendrils falling around her oval face, framing it to perfection. Pale skin and full lips with curves that were enhanced by her pantsuit. In response, his trousers started to feel way too snug. Gabrielle turned to follow his glance and shouted with joy, "Katrina!" Liam almost jumped, and Chewie barked in echoing surprise. The angel smiled back and hugged Gabrielle before kneeling in front of an excited Chewie who emerged from under the table to beg for a rub. "What a handsome boy you are!" She flushed over him before she smiled up at Liam. "Sorry, I love dogs. I didn't mean to be impolite." Gabrielle seemed amused. "Liam Harker, Chicago PD. May I introduce you to someone who has a magical touch with numbers? In fact, she's been handling money for as long as I can remember, before becoming a key investigator and consultant for the Vatican Police Department. You want Jameson Finch's assets found or any other shady dealings in line with money, she's the lady you need by your side. And the bonus is she's Irish, too." The apparition was smart, sexy, and had a smile to die for, and Liam knew it would be hell accomplishing anything if he didn't focus. Katrina extended her hand. The touch was electric, and he could see in the warm caramel of her eyes that he wasn't the only one who'd felt it. "Enchanted to meet you." "A pleasure, Liam. I'm Sister Katrina Walsh, but you can call me Katrina." Chapter 1. Liam knew when he was the butt of a joke, but this time he was certain it came from higher above, which was even worse. The elation he'd experienced at meeting Katrina was so quickly squashed that he felt dizzy and frustrated by the divine way of tricking him. Although he should have been used to being smacked in the back of his head by destiny, it was the only end possible for Finch's bastard sons. Bracing himself, and most importantly, curbing any inappropriate thoughts, he decided that the faster the job could be done, and Finch was behind bars, the quicker he could go back to his life of sinful thoughts. Not that he was a complete dog, but he was male, and this situation was weird. Gabrielle had snuck out, almost guiltily so, but Katrina didn't seem to mind. On the contrary, she had that unwavering, angelic smile on her beautiful face. Liam knew that he was now in hell. I did read the documentation that was available on the plane, but I'm sure there are loads more that we'll need to look into. In my experience, when you start digging, it's like a bottomless pit. Gabrielle had said she was Irish. Her accent was soft, with the warm lilt diluted with many travels. His own had mostly disappeared since he had arrived in America an eternity ago. "When did you arrive?" She smiled, looking up at him. "An hour ago. As soon as I landed, I hopped into a rental car and came here as per Gabrielle's request." Liam frowned. "Just like that, because a friend told you she needed help, you get on a plane and fly to the other side of the world without question?" She laughed. "I was already in Washington, D.C., so definitely not the other side of the world. Gabrielle is a friend, and when she told me people she cares about needed my expertise, I didn't have to ask anything else." Liam turned his coffee mug in his hand, shaking his head. "Did she tell you that it might be dangerous? We're not just dealing with numbers here, but men with guns." Still nothing in her face wavered. "I guess each and every one of us must act according to their conscience. I'm at peace with whenever my end arrives because I'm trying to do good." Something settled into Liam's belly. Those words rang true with him because he'd felt the same way. His entire life he'd wanted to be a cop and knew very well what the risks were. His latest knee injury was the proof of those risks. A couple of inches higher and the bullet would have hit his femoral artery, and Liam Harker would have been a memory. Yeah, it's the best outlook to have. He gestured at the paper strewn on the small table. I don't know exactly where to start with all this, and I guess it's not the best place to discuss this. What are your plans? Katrina started to gather the papers in a neat pile. I haven't thought about that yet. I was too impatient to find Gabrielle and to meet you. Liam blinked. Meet me? If possible, her smile grew even wider. Yes, Gabrielle told me how hard you and your brothers were working on the case. She wasn't keen on telling me the details, but she said it was important to you. And also, she told me you were an officer in the Chicago Police Department. If I could have taken that road, I think I would have liked being part of the police force. Was that regret that he saw blinking in her eyes? Her golden amber eyes? It reminded him of butterscotch caramel, his addiction when he was a kid. Now, too, as a matter of fact. If you're as good as Gabrielle said you are, you could enter the financial brigade even if you've never held a gun in your life. The smile returned and Liam was glad. Thank goodness. I don't think I'd ever been able to shoot someone even in the leg. Liam sat back, arching an eyebrow. After being shot in the leg myself and with all the pain and trouble it's brought, I don't recommend it. I should have been asked to be shot in the heart. The look of utter dismay on her face was too fun to pass, but only for a minute. It's okay, Katrina. It was only a joke. So you haven't been shot? Oh, I've been shot in the leg, but I'm not ready to die yet. I have something important to do, and that's why you're here. Not interested in lingering any longer on his war wounds, Liam opened his pack to put the papers back in. Where are you planning to stay? I thought to stay with Gabrielle, but as she's moving and her house is already rented out, I need to check out what's available. Liam paused as he grabbed his coat. The holiday season won't make it easy. What about I make a few phone calls? A couple of my brothers have connections. They may find you something. Someplace safe. Katrina frowned. Are you insinuating that we're in some kind of danger? Chewie pushed at Liam's hand, a sure sign he needed to go outside, although there was a much more pressing matter on his hands. He realized he was stuck with a beautiful and inaccessible woman who had no experience with dangerous situations, who'd probably never been directly involved in one, who despised violence and could become more of a liability than an asset. Just his luck. What did Gabrielle tell you when she asked for your help? Her warm eyes looked at him as if he were the one not grasping the situation. Not much. That a family needed my help. Liam didn't know if he should laugh or bang his head on the table. I need to call Gabrielle. Putting his coat on, he took his bag in one hand and Chewie's leash in the other. Katrina quickly put on her coat. What do you mean? What's going on? He walked out a little too fast for his stiff leg. Pushing the door open, the cold hit him hard, and he lifted his collar, allowing Chewie to sniff a fire hydrant as he pulled his cell phone out. He realized he'd left his gloves at the precinct. Liam, wait! Ignoring the soft voice behind him, he dialed Gabrielle's number, only to be sent to voicemail. A string of curses flew out of his mouth as the angel nun stepped in front of him, and he bit his tongue when he realized it. Sorry, sister. Before he could sidestep, Katrina touched his hand, and then that immobilized him better than any shackle. Liam, you seem upset, but I don't know why. I need you to explain. People passed them by on the sidewalk. The temperature made him huddle even more in his thick coat. He saw Katrina shiver. I'm not going to discuss it here in the cold. My apartment is around the corner, and it's Chewie's feeding time. Her smile returned. Of course, let's go. Chewie pulled on his leash, knowing perfectly that food was at the end of this trek. Katrina walked companionably beside him, admiring the Christmas decorations on the streets, and she laughed when a couple of kids started throwing snowballs at each other. Liam was tempted to close his eyes at the sound. It was so pure, so unchecked, it almost hurt his soul. Clenching his jaw, he pushed those unwanted emotions away. Katrina Walsh was off limits. She was married to another, and even if that man wasn't made of flesh and bones, in his mind it was the same thing. His mother's strict Catholic upbringing ingrained this profoundly and irrevocably in him. He didn't know why he felt such a strong connection with her. He hoped it was because she was Irish like his mother. After all, if it was another sick coincidence that Liam didn't want to contemplate, he had no idea how he'd deal with the situation. Silently, he pointed to a restored brick building. Since his injury, he'd trouble with his landlord and had to relocate in a rush. Gabrielle had helped and offered him an apartment that had been used previously in a mission as lodging. The downside was that he had to get up a flight of stairs, and his thigh didn't like that at all, often suggesting sleeping in his car. He appreciated having neighbors on the first floor. The elder lady, Mrs. Lupe, and her roommate, Marcus, who acted more like her caregiver, were friendly eccentrics who kept watch over anything and everything. Apart from the odd call over strange noises or invisible shadows, he liked them. Another added benefit was that Miss Lupe's nephew, Hector Nazario, was deep in the criminal underworld, but he was one of the good guys who'd helped him and his brothers secretly in the last few years. As a cop, Liam had serious issues with that, but when confronted with the fact that he shouldn't push aside any help to bring his father down, he'd had no other choice but to come to grips with it. Unlocking the door, he unhooked Chewy's leash, and the mutt leaped up and down the couch, shaking his shaggy brown fur while looking at him with hopeful eyes. All right. Let the human slave remove his boots and I'll get your food." And then he returned to Katrina. "Welcome to our little home. It's not much, but I had to relocate quickly. Gabrielle found me this place until I can look for something new. Get comfortable while I feed the impatient child in the room." Turning his back on her, he went into the small kitchen as Chewy was jumping all around him like an overjoyed puppy. Ignoring him, Liam quickly filled the kettle before taking both dog bowls and putting them on the counter as he got the food. Filling one dish, he put it down, and his dog scarfed his dinner down like it was going out of style. As he was washing the water bowl, he saw that Katrina had discarded her gear and was walking around his living room from the corner of his eye. There wasn't much to see. The last person who had lived here had been Zoe, his brother Archer's wife, and she had only used it as a temporary base. His kettle whistled, bringing him back to the present. He prepared his teapot and filled it with hot water. As Katrina approached the counter, he turned to fetch a couple of cups. "Wow, it's the first time since I've been here that I've seen someone making tea instead of coffee. There was only tea when I grew up, and I prefer it to coffee when I'm here." A euphemism of everything entailed, as in his childhood, tea, or what passed as a very weak version of it, was all he ever got to eat or drink, cold at the bottom of his mother's cup when she wasn't looking. However, that wasn't a topic for polite conversation with a nun. He pushed the steaming cup in her direction, careful to avoid any contact. She took the cup, closed her eyes, and sighed. Liam held his cup, admiring her beautiful face. Even in the shadows, it was as if she were radiating light. He was almost caught in the moment when she opened her eyes. "Thank you for the tea. Now start explaining why you frantically tried to reach Gabrielle." "I don't doubt your intelligence or your courage, but you're coming into this blind, and that's the most direct way to heaven for you. I appreciate your willingness to help, but I won't have you killed on my watch. I'll find another way to get the information I need." Where he thought the little nun would cringe at his order and tone, Katrina instead slammed her cup on the counter. If he wasn't mistaken, there was a fire in those wise eyes. "I want to know what's going on. What's making you so afraid of me helping you?" Was she for real? You're like a baby. You lead the sheltered life of a nun. The person after us won't go down without a nasty fight. He's violent and perverted, ready to sacrifice anything to get what he wants. So, sister, the best you can do is say a prayer, and I'm sending you back to where you came from, where it's safe." Calmness resettled over her features. "Gabrielle said a family needed my help. I guess it's yours. Who's after you? Ready to even kill you?" Liam felt tired now. So tired. His leg throbbed, and he'd had enough fighting her for today. So when he turned to look at her once more, the words flew out of his mouth before he could stop them, hurting like always. "My father."